This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 171, Creating Content with Software Developers. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is April 21st, 2016. Hello, or as we say in Texas, howdy, and thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. Just a reminder, this podcast is available on iTunes and Stitcher and SoundCloud, so if you like what you hear, please click on over and subscribe so you can get every single episode delivered directly to your happy little ears. Also, big news, we are now live on Google Play Music. Yay! Google Play has opened up its music app to podcasts, and sure enough, we are one of the podcasts featured. So I will provide the link in the blog post for this episode, and if you are a Google Play user, then you can get to us that way as well. Very exciting. I also want to invite you to subscribe to our weekly tip emails. These are emails that people really love. Every Friday, we send out a very quick, very actionable content marketing tip, plus links to our weekly video and the weekly blog post, as well as the podcast. Kind of a happy little package on a Friday morning. To subscribe, just go to resonancetips.com. Last week, we turned our attention to a dirty little secret, yes, an ugly truth around do-it-yourself content marketing. To find out what that is, please feel free to check it out on iTunes or Stitcher or via the RSS feed or Google Play, of course. Today, we return to our ongoing discussion on content marketing for IT brands, and today we're talking about how to get your content fodder from those wonderful software developers. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. Okay, two big news items out of Facebook this week. First of all, Facebook has introduced Facebook Live API. Now, if you're not familiar with APIs, it stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's basically turns Facebook Live into a tool that developers and publishers can incorporate into other apps. So in this case, those folks can incorporate Live into their existing broadcast setup. So with their setup to broadcast, they can incorporate Live into that setup. Also makes it possible for device manufacturers, so folks who make things like drones or dedicated cameras, they can integrate Live directly into their video products. So if you use a video camera or possibly a drone, you may notice a feature that lets you stream directly to YouTube. Well, now you'll be able to, with newer products, to stream directly to Facebook Live. Very, very cool. Now, because this is an API, an application programming interface, there are lots and lots of technical details around using it that I will not go into here, but what I will do is link to Facebook's announcement in the blog post for this episode. Excuse me. So if you're interested in Facebook Live API, you can get the details on that. Okay, another announcement from Facebook, and this is very cool. Facebook has opened up instant articles to all users. So instant articles, if you recall, is that feature that lets users read your content within Facebook instead of having to click through to your website. And this is important, especially for folks who are looking at Facebook in a place where they don't have great Wi-Fi connection or great cell reception, and it can be really, really slow if they need to click through to a separate website. Well, now Facebook lets those folks look at your content from within Facebook. Wonderful advancement on their part. Now, to get instant articles set up, there is a process involved. You have to go in and enable it, which just takes a couple of clicks, but then you need to submit articles for review, and then there's some code that needs to go on your website so that that content can feed directly through. I've got my team working on it for Resonance content, and I will keep you posted on those keep you posted on how it's going. Anyway, to learn more and to sign up for Instant Articles for your content, go to instantarticles.fb, as in Facebook, fb.com, instantarticles.fb.com. Okay, our content hit of the week is a post called An Introduction to the 4 Essential Types of Content Every Marketing Strategy Needs. This is by Demian Farnworth on the Copy Blogger blog. And I believe we featured Demian's work in previous hits of the week. He always produces good stuff. So the reason I like this post is that we, and I absolutely include myself in there, we talk about content as a lump thing. We talk about, okay, your content needs to be this or your content needs to do that. But actually, the word content is a hugely diverse descriptor. There are all different types of content that we need to be creating and publishing as part of our strategy. And what Demian does here, he helps us get our arms around the different varieties within this monolith that we call content. And this post is actually the beginning of a series that talks about what he calls the 4 essential content types. And those are: number 1, attraction. Number 2, authority. Number 3, affinity. And number 4, action. And he is rolling out those posts gradually as part of this series. Very, very fine work on Damien's part. And I will, of course, share the link in the blog post for this episode. Okay, that's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please tweet it to me at resonance, C-O-N-T, resonance content with the E-N-T lopped off, so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment, Creating Content with Software Developers. Already in 2016, we've brought in quite a few really exciting new clients into the Resonance fold. And I'm really struck by the thing that most of them have in common, and that is most of them come from the field of technology, specifically software companies. And, you know, it's funny when we begin these conversations with the marketing team, typically it starts with the marketing team, there's more than often than not a huge sense of hesitancy on their part, especially if their product is an SDK or an API. That's either a software developer kit or application programming interface. Essentially apps that are designed to be used by other apps, because those folks they need to appeal to a certain audience. And, you know, when we get to the bottom of their hesitation, it comes down to this. They're like, okay, you're going to have to talk to our developers at some point. And they're always very grave about this announcement. And then I lighten things up and saying, hey, I'm married to a developer. I'm totally comfortable talking with those guys. And it always leads to a very lighthearted conversation. But yes, Mr. Parker is a developer, specifically a software architect working for a company here in Houston. So, and I've been with him going on 18 years. So very comfortable talking with developers. And the reason that they're part of the conversation is that developers are the ones who understand the world of their product and the problems that it solves. And of course, you know, solving problems is what we content marketers do, right? So if we're going to create powerful content marketing for software brands, we need to bring those developers into the fold and to pick their brains and find out what they know. And also, you know, going back to my personal experience, we've worked with a lot of software companies, and we worked with a lot of developers to whom I'm not married, and achieved some terrific results. So what I want to do today is share some of those strategies I've developed over the years working with those software companies, and specifically collaborating with developers to create outstanding content marketing assets. And I want to share some of those strategies with you today. Strategy number 1, absolutely positively do your homework. Before you even contact the developer with whom you want to work on a particular piece of content, do your homework. And I got to say, folks, in today's environment, there's just no excuse for going into any situation completely uninformed. Okay, give me an hour with Google and I can establish a baseline knowledge of just about anything. Won't be very deep, but it'll be enough to let me carry on a reasonably intelligent conversation. And I encourage you to do the same thing. Really research the topic you're going to be asking about. Find out Find out the lingo, find out what perspectives are being presented at the different conferences, find out what, maybe there's some controversies brewing about this topic. And what that's going to do is allow you to go in informed, go in confident, and to ask intelligent questions, and more importantly, hold up your end of the conversation so that you're not just taking dictation on what these developers have to say to you. You can actually process it right then and there, and then use the responses to those answers to generate more in-depth questions and take the conversation to a new level. So that's strategy number one. Do your homework. Strategy number two, while you're setting up your interview or whatever you have planned with your developers, ask them what they read and whom they follow. And that's always an interesting exercise, because by bringing in their preferred sources and their preferred thought leaders into the conversation, you establish a connection. You say, hey, I'm interested in where your perspective comes from. I'm interested in where you get your news and your insights. And also it gives you a little bit of a leg up, because you're not out there on Google wondering what the heck is a reliable source and who is just some guy with way too much time on his hands. And you're also, again, you're establishing a connection, and you are busting that stereotype of the marketing person. A lot of these developers, again, learning from having been married to one, is that the marketing folks, they're just fluff people. They're just, all fluff, no substance. They're just there to get what they need and get gone, and they're not really interested in understanding anybody else's world. So what you can do is really break that stereotype, make it clear that you don't just want to get the surface facts of what you need to create this content. You really want to understand this area of expertise, and you want to understand it from their perspective, because, software issues are just like any other issues. There are multiple perspectives running around, and your content will be the richer for it if you're able to understand what's going on around that topic as you create your content and collaborate with these software developers. Number three, when you do sit down with your developer who's going to be helping with your content, one thing I like to do is begin with an open question. So especially if, I know for me, when I am researching a topic I don't know a lot about, I have this tendency to just kind of start rattling off my questions as we sit down for the interview. But I find it's really effective to sit down and say, okay, I've got some questions here, but first tell me all about X, whatever that topic is, and just let them talk. Let them talk, let them rattle on, let them ramble if they want to for a while. And I find that, number one, it's kind of an icebreaker. It's not, it deformalizes the situation if they can just sit and ramble on about something for a few minutes. But also, I find sometimes you will get some insights in the answer to that open question that will take your content in a totally different direction. And that can be a really good thing, rather than if I had just sat down and started rattling off a list of questions or written down the answers. And then also you can use the question you've prepared, once they're done with that introductory dump, if you will, then, go into and you can look at the questions you've prepared and tweak them according to what the developer has already laid out for you. And can be a really beneficial way of starting off those conversations, to start with that open question saying, tell me about whatever the topic is. Strategy number 4, if possible, get them in front of a whiteboard. And, sometimes programming or software development is so tied to, relationships and how things feed into one another and how two different pieces relate to one another. And sometimes if they're just telling me about it, they lose me. But I find if if I can get in a situation where there's a whiteboard and I can ask them to sketch it out for me, oh my gosh, that takes my understanding to a whole new level. If they had just told me about it, I would have maybe kind of sort of understood it. But if I can see it laid out and see those arrows, this goes this way and this goes that way, and this is how X feeds into Y, and Y is just really a collection of Z's, and then that feeds into A, B, and C. It is so helpful for my level of understanding of what they're talking about. And plus, geeks really dig whiteboards in my experience. So if you can get them in front of a whiteboard, and if you're doing this interview remotely, maybe you can do it on Skype and they can somehow position their webcam in front of a whiteboard and sketch it out for you. Or there are also video conferencing programs that have a sketch feature, so they can essentially share their screen and kind of sketch out what they're talking about. But that can be a tremendous help in understanding these complex technical issues that they're telling you about. And then finally, strategy number 5, a little humility goes a long way. Now, software developers are used to dealing with people who have no idea what they do and who don't care. So, as you from the moment you make first contact all the way through, make sure you're showing respect for what they do, for what they know, for what you don't know, and especially for the insights that they can offer you. And if you can show that respect all the way through, and it's not that you don't respect them, it's just that, if I keep in the front of mind, how can I communicate this, or how can I express this as respectfully as possible? It really goes a long way to creating a relationship. You're not just collaborating on this one piece of content. You're establishing a relationship, which is so important because chances are you're going to need to bring that person back somewhere down the line and ask for their help again in creating content. And that just it creates a solid foundation for you to come back and talk to those folks again and again and again. And if you keep the respect at the top of your mind, they will be more than happy to help you any way they can. So those are my top 5 strategies for creating content with software developers. If you have any questions or if you want to add to the conversation, I would love to hear from you. And you can send me a tweet at @ResonanceCont, or you can go to the website resonancecontent.com, and we've got a contact us form available for your use. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. Working with subject matter experts, whether they're software developers or brain surgeons or engineers, it can be one of the most interesting and rewarding aspects of our work as content marketers, and it can also be one of the most frustrating, depending on how it goes. And, when you're dealing with these folks, and I have worked with software developers, heart surgeons, oil and gas engineers, my secret weapon, and this kind of ties into the 5th strategy that I shared, my secret weapon is just impeccable professionalism, absolutely beyond the pale professionalism. And that comes from, that's manifested in the way I set expectations, the way we keep promises, the way even saying please and thank you. And one of the keys that I found is to give your subject matter expert a sense of ownership in what you're creating together. This is not a one-night stand. This is something that you need to collaborate with them on, and it's something that you are creating together. So whether you're putting together a blog post or an article for an industry publication or an infographic, whatever it is, keep your expert in the loop. Let them know the progress of it. Let them know when it will be published. And then, of course, once it is published, make sure that you're sending them the links when it's out there, and encourage them to share with their communities. And they get really excited about that. They can say, hey, here's a blog post that my company put out based on my insights. And they get into it, and they get into sharing it. I've even had clients where the developers kind of had a contest among themselves, when they shared, quote, their pieces of content, the ones that they had input on, which ones got the most retweets and which ones got the most views. And it actually turns into kind of a fun game. But But it all comes down to keeping them in the loop of that piece of content. And if you do that, you will build a tremendous amount of goodwill. And of course, the next time you need that expert's input for your content, they will be more than happy to give you everything you need. Okay, campers, that's it for me today. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. If you like what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed or newly via Google Play Music. Yay! And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. That's going to help us, that's going to help boost our search mojo when people go searching for content marketing podcasts, and that's going to help us reach out to a bigger audience. So I would so appreciate that. Also, remember to sign up for our Tip of the Week emails at resonancetips.com. As I mentioned recently, I have started taking a poetry class, so poetry is very much on my mind these days. So today I want to leave you a quote with another one of my favorite poets, W.H. Auden. He once said, quote, "Some writers confuse authenticity, which they ought to always aim at, with originality, which they should never bother about." Unquote. Something to think about. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.